So good morning everyone, and welcome to this morning's briefing from topconsultant.com on the state of the management consulting market, and in particular the state of hiring within the UK market. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Tony Restell. I'm one of the co-founders of Top Consultant. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and prior to that I was a strategy consultant for several years after university. Let me just begin by backtracking to the beginning of this year. Those of you who are regular readers of Top Consultant will know that at the beginning of each year we undertake a survey of both candidates and recruiters to try and establish the trends that are taking place in the market. And if I just backtrack for a moment to the beginning of 2010, it's very interesting to see collectively what all of our recruiter clients were expecting to happen over the course of that year. And I think that really sets the tone then for what I'm going to present to you for the next 10 or 15 minutes. Thereafter, we'll throw things open to questions for those of you that are on the live call. For those of you who are listening to the recording, we'll stop after 10 or 15 minutes. But if we look back to the data from the beginning of this year, what we've done at the beginning of each year is asked recruiters to try and predict the hiring activity that they're expecting within their businesses over the course of the coming year. And what's very interesting from these surveys is we can see just how good a predictor of activity they actually have been in the past. So if we look at the blue data, which is 2008, we can see that the balance here was very much towards firms expecting to make considerably more hires or more hires than the preceding year. So very bullish and aggressive about the amounts of hiring that they'd be undertaking. If we look then to the 2009 data, so that's to say this was taken in the months just after the financial meltdown, the banking crisis, we can see a massive swing to firms, very few of them expecting to make more hiring than the previous year, and correspondingly over on the right-hand side of the chart, significant numbers of firms expecting to make fewer hires than the previous year. And then for the 2010 data, so this was from the survey conducted in January and early February of this year, we can see that firms once again became much more optimistic about the hiring they'd be undertaking this year, and it swings full circle so that we can see firms expecting to make considerably more hires this year than they had done last year, obviously starting from a very low base in 2009. But I think just setting the scene here, what's really interesting with this data is just to see how accurately at the beginning of each year our consulting recruiter contacts have been able to predict the activity that then has actually taken place. And if we think about 2010, for example, we've seen a doubling since the beginning of this year in terms of the level of hiring activity that's taking place. So these predictions that everyone made at the beginning of the year have proved to be very accurate. Now, we do usually only undertake this survey once a year, just to give a viewpoint on what's going to happen in the following year. But we do have coming up within the next months, so I'll just switch a page there. Later on in September we have our Consultancy Careers Fair taking place, and last year that wasn't able to take place simply because the volume of recruiting within the consulting industry wasn't great enough for us to run that event. And with this event coming up, I'm really conscious that we want to be able to give candidates a strong steer and an accurate steer on how realistic it is for them to secure a role within consulting in the coming months, and also to be able to say with some certainty which practice areas are most likely to be doing the hiring. So that coming up for us for the first time in 2 years has been one big driver for us running an extra half-year survey on this data, but also just speaking with our clients on a day-to-day basis, trying to gauge what's happening in the market and what Top Consultant is seeing in terms of hiring patterns has been one of the biggest single points of topics of conversation. So rather than just giving our opinion on that, we'd much rather be able to give some hard facts. So we've undertaken this survey in the last 2 weeks of August, thanks to the 101 consulting recruiters who took part in this survey. The majority of those were actual consulting employers, a whole range of leading branded consulting firms and niche players, and then there were a minority as well of recruitment agencies and headhunters who responded in terms of the activity they're seeing at their clients. So thanks to everyone that took part, and let me just spend the rest of the presentation now sharing the key findings with you. So one of the first things we asked was, we just wanted to get a steer for how much staff retention had changed from this year since last year. Staff retention, obviously the number of consultants that are remaining within a consulting business rather than leaving to join a competitor or to leave the industry altogether. And within consulting, this is a very significant driver of hiring demand. Often the rate at which firms are losing staff can actually produce more demand for hiring than the growth within the consulting industry. So it's really key to understand what's happening within here. And we've color-coded the chart here, and basically the green responses represent those firms, those consulting recruiters, where staff attrition has worsened since last year, or significantly worsened in the case of the top bar there. And so that is contributing very strongly to the need to make more hires. Correspondingly, the red charts represent those parts or those that portion of the respondents where retention has not been an issue, and if anything has improved compared with last year. And yellow means it stayed pretty much the same. Now, the importance of this chart, if green is a lot bigger than red, then that means that the loss of staff to competitors and to consultants leaving the industry altogether has been a significant driver towards hiring. And I think we can all see there that the green portion of the chart is very nearly 50% of all respondents, whereas the red portion is barely over a quarter. So clearly worsening staff attrition has played a key role in the increase in hiring that we've seen so far in this year. And if I think, a number of firms have released their financial results within the last few weeks. I'm thinking of one firm in particular where I saw that staff attrition this time last year, they were losing 8% of their consulting staff, whereas now they're losing 17% of their consulting staff each year. So we're seeing a very significant return of this challenge that the consulting industry has always faced. And certainly the discussions that we're seeing amongst candidates about their satisfaction or rather dissatisfaction with this year's pay rises and bonuses, and the fact that they're now starting to look more aggressively at switching firms as a way of progressing their career, I don't see any reason to expect that this trend will not continue. Perhaps by way of backing that up, the next question that we asked our survey respondents to answer was whether they were seeing recruitment activity for the second half of this year going to pick up or slow down from the levels we'd seen in the first half of the year. And same methodology here. So the green responses represent all those firms who are expecting the second half of 2010 to be more buoyant from a hiring perspective than the first half was. Bear in mind that in the first half we've already seen a very significant increase in hiring over what we'd seen in 2009. And once again we can see the green portion there really dominating, give or take 2/3 of all respondents expecting to make more hiring activity within the second half than they've done in the first half. So really encouraging news for those of us who are looking for a consulting job, for those of us whose businesses depend on helping consulting firms to source candidates. This is all very good news indeed. We didn't want to stop there though, because I think one of the key messages that we've been hearing in the market is that different practice areas have been seeing very different levels of business wins and very different issues in terms of recruitment needs and challenges. And we've also been hearing a tale of differing fortunes amongst firms. So even firms who are serving the exact same sector, we're seeing some who are doing very well and needing to recruit very aggressively, and others who are still really struggling. And so with the remainder of this survey, we wanted to just look at the actual practice area activity. And so we also asked our recruiter respondents which practice areas they were expecting to see accelerated hiring activity in the remainder of this year. And I think what's really encouraging from this chart is that if we exclude the public sector, where there's obviously been major governmental impacts within the last month or the last months of this year, then pretty much every other significant practice area, there are a good proportion of firms who are expecting to accelerate their hiring in those practice areas within the remainder of this year. And obviously not all firms serve all practice areas. So more than 50%, in fact nearly 55% of firms expecting their financial services hiring to accelerate in the remainder of this year. And those of you who operate in that space already will know that the first half of this year has already been pretty buoyant within that area. Other major areas like energy and utilities, telecoms, media, entertainment, retail, consumer goods, all looking like they're going to be enjoying a better hiring scenario for the remainder of this year. But I think what's really interesting here, and we're going to see this on the next chart as well, we see that public sector, actually there are 7 or 8% of respondents there who are expecting to accelerate their hiring in that area within the remainder of this year. And I can certainly think of client discussions I've had within the last couple of weeks where some smaller niche firms are actually looking to grow that part of their business during the current economic cycle. So although overall public sector consulting may be facing a very difficult period, there are firms who are hiring and who are looking to exploit the current cost-saving drive within government to actually grow that part of their business. Moving to the opposite question in that case, where do you expect there to be the greatest cutbacks in recruitment or activity, or indeed for you to be needing to force through headcount reductions? And no great surprise here that the overwhelming majority of respondents are expecting their public sector consulting practices and the related education practice area to be cut back significantly. But what I'd really flag here, financial services, again, we can see more than 10% of respondents are expecting to have a slower second half of the year or to need to make cutbacks in that part of their business compared with the first half of the year. So although in the previous chart we saw that the majority of firms are expecting to grow financial services quite aggressively from a hiring perspective, there's nonetheless a pocket of firms who are really struggling in that area still and who are foreseeing cutbacks. Equally, within the public sector, we're seeing here that the vast majority are expecting to be slowing down their hiring and potentially making cutbacks in that area. But on the previous slide, we also saw that there are firms who are expecting to hire and exploit that situation. So one of the things I would take away from today's call, if you're a candidate, you really need to do your research and find out about individual firms and how their practice areas are doing, because it isn't the case that there's a universal tale for each practice area, that all public sector practices are doing terribly or that all financial services practices are doing fabulously. There are pockets of firms who are bucking the trend in either a positive or a negative way. Now, perhaps most useful of all, if we actually net out those two figures, so we take all the firms who are expecting to grow those practice areas and then we deduct from those all the firms who are expecting to scale back or to have cutbacks in those practice areas, we then get a net figure for each of those practice areas. And what we can see here is there are a handful of practice areas where hiring is expected to slow down or even go into reverse in the second half of this year. And those will be the public sector, the education, leisure and lifestyle, science and research, and facilities management practice areas. All the other practice areas within the consulting industry are expecting to see accelerated hiring within the remainder of this year, and to varying degrees. So in the middle of the chart there we have a number of practice areas: healthcare, pharma, automotive, distribution, where the growth is going to be really quite modest, and certainly to the casual observer you're not going to really see any significant change there. But then over onto the left-hand side of the chart, there are certainly some practice areas where we can expect to see quite a marked upturn in hiring activity now that September is upon us. So that brings us to the end of the data that we've collected from our survey respondents. Thank you to everyone who took part in that, and I hope the findings have been really useful to you.